Have you ever really stopped to wonder why you choose one thing over another? Why you crave a hot coffee on a cold morning, or why that ice cream cone seems like the best idea in the world on a summer afternoon? Well, there's this powerful, almost invisible force at work, a key idea in economics that's pulling the strings behind every single one of our choices. It's called utility. And today, we're going to dive in and uncover this secret behind everything you do.
All right, so here's the game plan. First, we're going to nail down what utility actually is, this want-satisfying power. Then we'll get into its surprising rules. After that, we'll look at the 4 ways it's created, clear up some really common mix-ups, and finally, we'll see how economists try to figure out how much is enough.
So, let's jump right in. What on earth is this thing called utility? It sounds kind of academic, I know, but trust me, the basic idea is something you and I deal with literally every second of every day. Just think about it for a second. That little ping inside you, that feeling of wanting something, knowing that a certain thing, whether it's a product or a service, is going to scratch an itch or solve a problem. That's the starting point for everything. It's that feeling of needing something you don't have that gets the whole ball rolling. And boom, that's the textbook definition right there. Utility is just the power that a good or service has to satisfy a human want. It's the fancy economic term for that, oh, I need this, or I really want that feeling. A glass of water has utility because it quenches your thirst. A sandwich has utility because it fixes your hunger. It's really that simple at its core. Okay, but this is where it gets super interesting. Utility isn't some fixed, concrete thing. It has its own set of rules, its own personality, you could say. And honestly, some of them are probably going to surprise you. First off, utility is totally relative. It all depends on time and place. A big, warm coat, it has massive utility when you're freezing in the middle of winter. But that exact same coat on a boiling hot day at the beach, it has basically zero utility. In fact, it's just a pain to carry around. Same object, different situation, completely different utility. And it's also subjective. What that means is it's all in our heads. It's different for every single one of us. A doctor gets a ton of utility from a stethoscope, right? It's essential for their job. But for me, it's just a weird-looking necklace. It's all because our tastes, our jobs, and our needs are all different. Now, this leads to a really mind-bending point. Utility is ethically neutral. It's morally colorless. The concept of utility doesn't care if a want is good or bad. A knife has utility if you're using it to slice an apple for a snack, and it has utility if it's being used to do something terrible. Utility just means a want is being satisfied. That's it.
And here are a few other key rules, kind of rapid fire. Utility depends on how badly you want something. The hungrier you are, the more utility that pizza has. It's the absolute foundation of demand. We don't demand things unless they have utility for us. Some things, like electricity, can do a bunch of different jobs. And last but not least, you can't put a number on it. It's an abstract feeling, something you just experience.
Okay, so if utility is this big deal, this driving force, where does it actually come from? How is it made? Well, economists have broken it down into 4 main ways that utility gets created or boosted in the things we use. First up, we have form utility. This is all about changing the shape or structure of something to make it more useful. I mean, a pile of logs has some utility, maybe for a fire, but when a carpenter takes that wood and builds a beautiful chair or a sturdy table, bam, they've just created a massive amount of new utility.
Next, there's place utility. You know the saying, location, location, location? That's basically this. An object's value can totally skyrocket just by moving it. A huge pile of sand on a beach is pretty useless, right? But move that same sand to a construction site in the city, and suddenly it's incredibly valuable. Transporting things creates utility.
And hey, utility isn't just about physical stuff. That's where service utility comes in. This is created when professionals, think doctors, teachers, mechanics, lawyers, provide their personal skills and expertise. They're not handing you a product, but their actions are satisfying a really important want or need.
And finally, there's knowledge utility. This one is huge in our tech world. Think about it. A brand new tablet might have 100 amazing features, but if you don't know they exist or how to use them, they have zero utility for you. The more you learn about a product, the more useful, the more utility it has for you.
Okay, this is a really important one, because these words get thrown around and mixed up all the time. People often confuse utility with similar ideas like usefulness or pleasure. So let's take a second and draw some really clear lines in the sand between them.
First up, utility is not the same as usefulness. Just remember, utility is about satisfying any want, No judgment. Usefulness, on the other hand, implies something is actually good for you, that it has value in use. The example here is pretty intense, but it makes the point perfectly. Liquor definitely has utility to an addict because it satisfies their craving, but we can probably all agree it has no real usefulness.
Next, let's separate utility from pleasure. Something can have incredibly high utility without giving you even a tiny bit of enjoyment. The best example? Getting a shot at the doctor's office. That injection has tremendous utility. It can cure a sickness or prevent a disease, but I don't think anyone would describe the experience as pleasurable.
And that brings us to utility versus satisfaction. Think of them as the before and after. They're two sides of the same coin. Utility is the cause. It's the reason you want to do something in the first place. Satisfaction is the result. It's that aha feeling you get after your want has been fulfilled.
All right, for our last section, let's just touch on how economists think about the amount of utility we get from something. Because it's not just a yes or no thing, there are levels. And understanding this is the key to why we eventually stop doing something, like eating pizza.
First, you've got total utility. This one's pretty simple. It's the grand total, the overall satisfaction you get from consuming everything. So if you eat an entire pizza, the total utility is the sum of all the good feelings you got from every single slice combined.
But this is where the real magic of decision-making happens. It's called marginal utility. This is the extra bit of satisfaction you get from consuming just one more unit. So that first slice of pizza when you're starving, it has ridiculously high marginal utility. But that eighth slice, the additional happiness it gives you is probably tiny and might even make you feel sick, and that's why you stop eating. We almost always make our choices based on the margin.
Welcome to The Explainer. You know that feeling, right? The first bite of pizza, the first time you hear an amazing song, it's just the best. Well, today we're going to break down why that is. Turns out there's a core economic principle that explains it all.
So let's just jump right in. Why is the first bite always the best? Seriously, think about it. The first slice of pizza, that first sip of your morning coffee, nothing else quite hits the same. What's going on there?
Okay, to really get this, we need to start thinking like an economist. And they have a special word for that feeling of satisfaction or enjoyment you get from something. They call it utility.
All right, but utility isn't just one thing. We've got to break it down into two types. First up is total utility. Just think of this as your overall score, like the grand total of all the satisfaction you've gotten from every slice of pizza you've eaten so far. And then, and this is the really important one for our question, we have marginal utility. This is all about the extra satisfaction you get from each new bite. It's that feeling of, should I have one more? It's what changes your total score. Okay, so how do these two ideas, total and marginal utility, actually play together? Well, let's put some numbers to it. Economists use a pretty simple table. They call it a utility schedule to see exactly how this works. So take a look at this table. It tells the whole story. With that very first slice, both your total and your marginal utility are a perfect 10. You're super happy. But then, with the second slice, look what happens. Your total utility goes up to 18. You're happier overall. But the marginal utility, the extra bit of joy from just that second slice, dropped to 8. See the pattern? You're still enjoying it, but just a little bit less each time. Okay, numbers on a table are great, but things get really clear when we turn this into a picture. Let's take that data and plot it on a graph. This is where you can really see the story unfold. And here we go. This graph just lays it all out, doesn't it? You see that blue line for total utility? It's climbing. Our overall satisfaction is going up with each new slice. But then look at the orange line, the marginal utility. It's heading straight down. That right there is the visual proof that the extra satisfaction from each slice is getting smaller and smaller. So, okay, your total satisfaction is rising, but the joy from each extra bite is falling. Which kind of leads to a big question, right? What happens when you finally hit that peak? When you've had enough? Well, you eventually get to a point where your total utility just maxes out. In our example, it hits 30. That next slice of pizza adds 0 more enjoyment to your overall feeling. You've hit the ceiling. You literally cannot be any more satisfied. And right at that moment, when your total utility is at its absolute peak, guess what your marginal utility is? Yep, it's 0. That slice added nothing. This is the moment economists have a name for, the point of satiation. You're perfectly full and content. But what if you push it? What if you go for one more slice after you're already perfectly full? Well, now look at your total utility. It actually starts to go down. And that's because the marginal utility of that last slice is now negative.
You've officially crossed the line from satisfaction into regret. That extra bite made you feel worse. We've all been there.
So let's just recap this relationship because it's the whole key. Step 1, they start out the same. Step 2, as your total utility goes up, your marginal utility goes down. Step 3, when total utility hits its absolute max, marginal utility is 0. And step 4, when total utility starts to fall, marginal utility has gone negative. That's the dance between them.
You know, this pattern we see with pizza isn't just some random thing. It's so predictable and so fundamental to how we behave that it's actually a core law in economics. And here's the man who really put it down on paper, Professor Alfred Marshall. Back in 1890, in his huge book, Principles of Economics, he laid out the formal definition. He was one of the first to really nail down this pattern in human behavior. Okay, that's a lot of academic language, right? Let's just boil it down. What it really means is simple. The more you have of something, the less you want more of it. It's basically the official, fancy economic rule for too much of a good thing.
Now, of course, for this law to work perfectly, like in our graphs, economists have to make a few assumptions. They assume, you're being rational and trying to get the most satisfaction, that every slice of pizza is exactly the same. You're eating them one right after the other, and your income and tastes don't magically change halfway through dinner.
All right, before we move on, let's just lock this in. Let's put total and marginal utility side by side one last time to make sure the difference is crystal clear. So just remember it like this. Total utility is your overall score for the entire experience. It goes up, but at a slower and slower pace. Marginal utility, on the other hand, is the points you get for each individual bite. And that score can be positive, it can be 0, or it can even be negative. Okay, so why should you care about any of this? I mean, beyond just overanalyzing your lunch choices, what's the real-world impact here? Well, this idea is actually a huge deal. It's a cornerstone for understanding our entire economy. It helps explain why we buy the things we do and why we're willing to pay certain prices. I mean, think about the classic paradox. Why are diamonds, a luxury, so much more expensive than water, which we literally need to survive? Well, it's because, for most of us, water's everywhere. The marginal utility of one more glass is super low, but the marginal utility of getting your first diamond? That's incredibly high. This principle is at the heart of how we value everything.
Hey, welcome. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on a huge economic idea that, honestly, secretly runs our entire lives. It explains everything, from why you buy what you buy to why something essential like water is cheap, while something you just want, like a diamond, can cost a fortune. All right, let's get right into it. Seriously, think about it for a second. You're starving, right? That first slice is just absolute heaven. The second one, yeah, that's still really great. The third, it's good. But by the time you're on slice 4 or maybe 5, you start to get that feeling like, maybe I should have stopped. So what's the deal with that? Why does it happen every single time? Well, that feeling of getting less and less satisfied isn't just some weird quirk about how you eat pizza. Nope, it's actually a universal principle, a fundamental law that economists have been studying for ages. And, of course, it has a name. We can call it the law of enough, for short, but its official fancy name is the law of diminishing marginal utility. I know it sounds super complicated, but the pizza example proves that you already get it. You understand this intuitively. The most important word here, the one to really focus on, is marginal. In economics, marginal just means the next one, or the additional one. So marginal utility isn't about your total happiness from all the pizza slices combined. No, it's about the little boost in satisfaction you get from one more slice, or one more cup of coffee, or one more episode of that show you're binging. So what if we tried to put some numbers on that feeling? Well, this table does exactly that. Check it out. That first unit, the first slice, gives us this huge satisfaction boost. We'll call it a 10. The second one gives us a little less, an 8. And you can see the pattern, right? With each additional unit, the marginal utility, that extra bit of satisfaction, just keeps dropping until, bam, at unit number 6, it hits 0. You're totally full. You've had enough. And what about unit 7? You actually feel worse. That's a -2. That's negative utility. You've gone too far. Now, this is where it gets really cool, when you actually visualize it. Every single point on this downward sloping curve comes directly from the numbers in our table. It's a perfect picture of our pizza experience, isn't it? Satisfaction starts way up high, then it goes down, it hits 0 right on that line, and then it dips into negative territory, what economists call the disutility zone. This simple little curve, It is the backbone of so much in economics. Okay, so right about now, you're probably thinking, wait a second, what about things I just can't get enough of? And that is a fantastic question. Economists have definitely thought about it too. So let's dive in and look at some of these so-called exceptions. Right, so people will often point to things like hobbies, stamp collecting, where every new stamp feels just as exciting. Or they'll talk about a miser who seems to love every single extra dollar they get. The same argument gets made for things like addictions, for power, and of course, the big one, money. I mean, doesn't everybody always want more money? This is probably the most common counterargument you'll hear. It's this idea that no matter how much money you have, you'll always get at least a tiny bit of satisfaction from one more dollar. But does that actually break the law? Well, think about it this way. For someone who has very little, an extra $100 is, it's life-changing. It could be food for the week. That $100 has incredibly high marginal utility. But for a billionaire, that same $100 has extremely low marginal utility. They might not even notice it. It adds almost nothing to their overall satisfaction. So you see, the law still holds. The value of the additional dollars still diminishes, even if it never quite hits zero. And as for those other cases, like addictions or a miser's obsession, well, economists argue that they aren't true exceptions either, mainly because they violate a key assumption of this whole model, that the person is acting rationally. So these are really just apparent exceptions that help us see where the boundaries of the rule are. Okay, so why does any of this stuff really matter in the real world? Well, for one, this single, simple law helps us solve one of the oldest puzzles in all of economics. This is what's called the paradox of values. Water is absolutely essential for survival. Its use value is massive. Diamonds, on the other hand, are mostly just for decoration. Their use value is pretty low. So why on earth are diamonds ridiculously expensive while water is so cheap? The answer, as you probably guessed, is marginal utility. Because water is so abundant, the marginal utility of one more glass of it is practically zero for most of us. But because diamonds are so rare, the marginal utility of getting one more diamond is incredibly high. So price is driven by marginal utility, not total usefulness. And that right there beautifully connects to an even more famous concept. You've heard of the law of demand, right? It just says we buy more of something when the price goes down. But why? It's because of diminishing marginal utility. As we consume more of something, our satisfaction from the next one drops. So the only way you're going to be tempted to buy that fifth slice of pizza is if the price is low enough to match that lower level of satisfaction you're going to get from it. This brings this whole big idea right down to your everyday life. To you, the consumer, this law explains exactly how you decide what's worth buying and, just as important, when it's time to stop buying. Let's just walk through this table together. Imagine some product costs $50. For the first one you buy, the satisfaction you get is worth, say, $100 to you. Hey, that's a fantastic deal, so you buy it. The second one is worth $80 of satisfaction, still more than the $50 price. You buy that one too. You keep going until you get to the fourth one. At this point, the satisfaction it gives you is worth exactly $50, the same as the price. This is your stopping point. Why? Because for the fifth unit, you'd only get $30 of satisfaction, but you'd have to pay $50. A rational person just isn't going to make that trade. And that perfect stopping point? It has a name, of course. It's called consumer's equilibrium. It's this simple but incredibly powerful formula that guides our purchasing decisions every single day, whether we realize it or not. You stop buying at the exact point where the marginal utility, the satisfaction from the next item, is equal to the price you have to pay for it.